Welcome. Okay, we're recording. Welcome, everybody. My name is Darren Calhoun. Pronouns are he, him, and it is absolutely a pleasure to be here with you as we talk a little bit about self care and surviving the comment section. Tonight, I'm mainly drawing on several experiences I've had over the past 20 or so years without dating myself online in engaging people, not just for the sake of chatter on the internet, but actually about how I've helped to make change and how I've really done the work of sustaining myself in all of this. And it's a work in progress. I'm not speaking as expert. My therapist would tell you that any moment. So yeah. So let's go back. I've been on the internet forever. Like if you remember AOL or if you remember bulletin board systems before that was more common. Um, Things like Yahoo 360, which was really like the first major social network, even before MySpace. But Yahoo kind of destroyed that property in so many ways. But all that to say, I've been engaging and putting like really vulnerable and important parts of myself online for a number of years. Yes, Yahoo Messenger too was another one of those things. And there were whole cultures that had kind of come up around that because in these early days of the internet, as I stroke the grays in my beard, in these early days of the internet, it was kind of standard that you didn't use your real name, that you didn't have your picture on there, or that if you did have a picture, it was only with people you trusted. Um, there was still a taboo, if you will, about doing things like meeting up in person or exchanging contact information. It was still something you typically didn't do. Um, but we, especially as a queer youth growing up, it was like, this is how I reached out to other people who were like me, how I found people who could, I could talk to about the things that were true in my life. And so it became important way early on that I figured out ways to navigate this online cyberspace thing. Yes, we're sharing usernames. If you ever came across, what were some of my names? VCNet1 was my very oldest online name, and it was like two of my initials, and just yeah, it was. There were just ways we had of being, and it's interesting. We come full circle back to needing usernames that aren't just our regular like Facebook names now. Um, and so if we fast forward a bit to where we are now, we're in a space and a time where all kinds of people have uh, have access to the internet. All kinds of people have ways that they're showing up online. We're seeing literal democracies change. We're seeing literal uh, elections and so forth being affected by what's happening online. We know that in a previous US election, there were bot factories set up by other countries just to stir discord, not just in one particular direction, but just to get. There was a fake, well known Black Lives Matter page that looked like it was a Black Lives Matter page, but it was not. It wasn't verified. It wasn't actually connected to real people. And then there were other pages, conservative pages and so forth that would put out fake information, that would kind of skew actual real details and get people riled up around that. And we found out just how profound the internet and online engagement can be. And to this day, I don't think we've still fully acknowledged the impacts of what it means for us to have internet access and be online. And I forgot to start my timer. I'm just going to start the timer now so I don't talk your ears off forever. Um, and so, what we are seeing is this opportunity for huge impact and huge detriment, really, from what happens on the internet. I'll have to manually. Carrie, my timer's not working. If you can, when I'm getting down to about 5 minutes, if you can just message me, that would be super. And so here we are 20 let me take it back to 2019. I was invited or joined a Facebook group, and it was a gathering of worship leaders. And for me, I'd seen in lots of groups where if you get around some people who have a shared interest, it can be a really smart way to find out like what's going on or get help with a particular problem, whatever. But what I've also known is that gathering of spaces that are full of Christians also comes with certain landmines. And in this one particular group, the main group was just a worship leaders group. But what I quickly began to find is that only certain topics were allowed in the group, and they skewed a certain way. And so uh, I had seen these folks want to talk about maybe racism or maybe want to talk about um, different kind of topics that they don't have space to talk about elsewhere. And when the group would shut all of those conversations down, some of our people who are in that group created this subgroup. So it went from the main worship leaders group to this worship leaders subgroup that's about different controversial topics or that where people want us to do discussion. I was like, I am here for it. Ran to sign up. Great, let's have these conversations. And as I joined the group and as I got to see what was going on, um, seeing that I've been doing this for a number of years, I knew not to start off with who I am and where I am and all that other stuff because people make some assumptions and so forth. So I started off with presenting something or creating a post that could speak to where most of the people were. And because every week, as soon as you have a discussion group of Christians, the first, second, and third topics are going to be: is racism real? What about the LGBTQ issue? Or as they would say, the homosexuality issue, and something about women in leadership. Those are those are the go-to topics. Most people have not done any work on these topics. Um, and well, I shouldn't say most people. Most cisgender heterosexual men haven't done any work on these topics, especially if they're white. Um, and their influence and power is amazing on the internet, even to this day, Zuckerberg. And so um, here we are in the group. Everyone's making a post. What about race? What about LGBTQ? What about women in leadership? And these are all topics I talk about pretty regularly. So I would jump in. Um, and it was interesting where that first reaction is, well, as a Christian, we believe this. And it's like, I'm also a Christian. And I've also learned not to necessarily talk about my beliefs, but more so to talk about, well, I've seen people who believe this and then others who believe that, and kind of expand this framework of what belief is and looks like. Um, and people would really respond kind of harshly and kind of accusation with full of accusations and so forth. And it was a little bit more intense than I was used to, but I was like, well, I mean, new group. Most of the time I'm not in like actively conservative spaces, so it is what it is. Put on your nice face, smile, be nice, it'll work. And what I found was I shared a post, and if many people here may be familiar with Exodus, the ex gay ministry, and Alan Chambers, who was the last executive director of that organization. I shared a post where he, as a married man who no longer necessarily identifies as gay, where he talks about some of the pitfalls of ex gay ministry. And he does not advocate necessarily at that point, he doesn't advocate for same sex marriage, but he does say, hey, a lot of these change efforts were really harmful to people, and we should be more mindful of what that impact is. Somehow, the responses coming in from me sharing him saying that were, why are you trying to shove the gay agenda down our throats? And I'm like, what part of this was on the agenda? Also, could you send me a copy? Because I still don't have my copy. Um, And it was just, I couldn't rationalize the strong visceral reaction to me sharing someone who embodies exactly the theology that they would advocate for, at least when it comes to a formerly a gay identified man getting married to a woman, or who would at least identify as, celibacy being the best option here. Like, if you're in conservative thought, typically one of those two are the only available outcomes that aren't utterly, deeply harmful, like conversion therapy is. And yet, when I shared a topic that I thought was more so agreeing with their views, they took very strong personal reaction to me. And we have somebody in the comments says we have the most concealed agenda, though. There is an agenda, and I'll get to that at the end, but it's not what people think. Um, and so I found that I was getting these real strong reactions from people. I found that I did not have the charm that I can usually use. There is a thing called pretty privilege, and if you smile enough, and if you like look stereotypically attractive enough, you can get away with some stuff. None of it was working. Nothing. Like, couldn't smile enough, couldn't be nice enough, couldn't use wisdom and kind words enough. Everything I did was met with this deep antagonism, and I had not experienced this before. And at that point, I'd done at least 15 years of having conversations across difference in different settings. And I could not figure out, why is it that everything that's ever worked before wasn't working in this Facebook group? I was used to talking to conservatives. I was used to talking to people who maybe were not looking to change their theology. So I knew I wasn't quietly signaling that I wanted to change people's theology, but I was constantly getting tagged as, you're trying to force us into something and you're trying to attack Christian values. And I'm like, I'm a Christian, I'm a worship leader, I'm invested in this, and this is also my experience. And I'm just talking about my own experience. So why is this so upsetting to you? If we fast forward a bit, the person who founded this group um, became especially antagonistic of me. He began to jump in on any topic that I discussed. He would jump in and say, "Oh, Darren thinks he's the most woke in the room. Darren's just going to come and tell us all what to think and what to believe." And I'm like, "Have you ever listened to anything I ever said? Like, where do you get this?" And it came to the point that he started, as an admin, deleting my posts. And then I'd say, well, what rule did I violate? And he kind of evaded or not answer me. And then another administrator would say, "Oh, he said you were posting too much in the group." And I was like, "Well, what? Well, fine. I Because I can post multiple times a day, and that may be too much for the group. What is the boundary? What is the expectation for our group?" "Well, it's not that you can't post every day. It's just you just shouldn't post so much." And it was like, "Well, what am I posting too much of?" It was like, well, everything's not about race. And I was like, "I'm talking about my experience. I don't get to have a time where I'm not black." I don't know if you noticed. I don't get to have a time where my experience doesn't become part of a conversation. And I kept getting these vague warnings, these vague demands about what I should do and what I shouldn't do to be acceptable in the group. And the ways that I was being moderated kept escalating, to the point that if I were just having a conversation with somebody else and it was a pleasant conversation, he would come in and start making fun of me in the comments. It was like, what is going on? And so I would message some of the other admins, because I was like, do you see this? Am I the only one who's seeing this? And they're like, "Yeah, I can't believe he would do that. He's such a nice guy. Oh, he's so great. I just can't believe he's acting like that." And it's like, "Well, can you say something to him about it?" "No, I don't want to do that. He's the founder of the group. It's his group." It was like, "But you agree that he's doing something that at minimum seems out of character and unjustified, but you won't say anything about it." And so that went on to the point that it became kind of consuming for me. And in retrospect, I would say I was being gaslit by the atmosphere of those admins and that particular administrator, because what they were doing was, what you see isn't really what you see, but it keeps happening and you know that it's happening, but you're telling me nothing's happening. And this is one of the ways that we can kind of get wrapped into giving more of ourselves and going back and forth with people and or questioning our own thoughts, because other people have other things that's going on for them that they then project onto us. And so, um, what happens next in this is, um, and I'm giving the context because this is how important this had become to me. I had started to do everything I could to like make sure that I was having reconciliation kind of conversations with people that I who'd crossed me in the group. And it became known that even if you got on quote unquote Darren's bad side, that it wasn't just he was going to write you off. It was he's going to, want to talk on the phone and make sure we like clear up what our, disagreement was, and have a third party involved. Like, I had done very tangible modeled efforts of, if I have a deep disagreement with somebody, it's not to write them off. I care about them more than I care about being right. And so I built up a pretty good reputation, but it wasn't until someone in the group who was in it, who became an admin. The group was founded by a white guy. One of the admins, or somebody who became an admin, is a black guy. Before that, the group only had white male admins, and they added this black guy, and they added a woman later, and because they realized when they kept having conversations about race, no one who wasn't white and male had an opinion in the administrative team. And so when this black guy got on the team, he got frustrated, or he voiced his frustration with the way conversations went in the group. And he did this thing where he went on live one day and was just like, we show up, we try to tell you our experiences, and you just shoot us down and you tell us that what we're saying didn't happen to us. And in him ranting to the other white folks in the group and saying his own experience as a heterosexual cisgender black man, he then turned and paused like mid thought and was like, and you know what? Darren Calhoun really, really does model this kind of like thoughtful engagement, and y'all just be giving him a hard time for no reason. And he just kind of gave me this random shout out. And from that day, at least 25% of the group became nicer to me. And I was like, what happened? I didn't change. But suddenly, I was credentialed, if you will, by somebody who was closer to what they liked, closer to their own ideals. The next time something similar happened, it was when that group founder continued to be antagonistic, and I said, "Hey, this isn't going anywhere. Can we have a third party to moderate? Because you even violated what the agreements you had with your own admins, and no one is doing anything about it. Can we at least have an agreed third party? Since everybody's your friend, apparently, pick somebody who can help us talk this out." Finally, he agreed, and we had like a 2-hour phone conversation. And in that conversation, this person who I trusted, she translated, if you will, a white cisgender heterosexual woman translated for him what was going on, and so forth. And he could hear it, and he started naming things like, well, I was irritated that day. I was tired that day. I was agitated. I didn't really listen. I crossed these boundaries that I set. I'm not. He was able to hear from her and self assess things that I could never say to him. And that's when I started realizing that this isn't about me. This is more so about him, about the ways that he sees and thinks and works. And us navigating this isn't simply a matter of me having the right words, the right arguments, the right articles, the right videos, the right illustrations. It's about the right people talking to him. And so this is actually, this story is very much my midlife crisis, my existential crisis. It was what changed the way that I engage in doing all of my work, not just being online. Because what I learned in November of 2019 was that there's this thing called the movable middle. And the movable middle is this idea that um, if you are, and this isn't a the idea comes from a political stance, but there's different ways that I'm going to interpret it. So if we say this is me, I'm over here on my left, and I am progressive in my thoughts, and I am intersectional in my identity, and all this. People at quote unquote my opposite end aren't going to listen directly to me. Now, I knew to like use certain words that they like or certain language that they use. I was able to accommodate that, but I still wasn't getting through. And for years, I only looked at two camps. But this movable middle idea is that between here on the left end and the progressive end, and there on the right end, on the conservative end, is this very silent majority that also is undecided in some things. And so while I had the patience to go back and forth with somebody who was on the far end in that conservative camp, what was happening all these years is that I was actually affecting people who were in that silent middle, who watched me go back and forth, watched my patience, watched the ways that I used illustrations, watched the articles and videos that I would share. They would go, oh, and then they quietly come and inbox me later and ask me more questions. And so what I realized that in 20 years of affecting change, I had not affected anybody at the far opposite end. Everyone who I'd ever affected, everyone who'd been to a conference, everyone who'd ever come and attended a workshop had come from the middle, who were movable. They were there because maybe they experienced something for the first time, like being present when someone experienced racism. They were there because maybe their kid came out and all of a sudden all the answers that their church had been providing their whole lives didn't have the answers for how they could navigate life with their kid. They were there because all of these things that were affecting them, they knew that the answers they had were not enough. And even though they still sounded conservative, even though they still practiced a lot of the external values, they were in a place where they were seeking another answer. They were seeking another resource. And it was all of those people, like I mentioned in my story, the Black guy who spoke up for me, the woman who spoke up for me, both of those people had identities that already would cause questions because society isn't built for those identities. And so when the Black guy saw, oh yeah, we share some of the same stuff where you experience things and people just tell you it didn't happen. And where the woman who also had worked as a nurse knew what it was like to work with people of color, and she would see them be treated differently. And then she knew that she could come and say words to people and they would suddenly act differently. She used her power. She didn't even have to be a Karen to do it, but she knew how she could leverage change. And so what ends up happening is those two people kind of taught me. It was like, these are the ones who've been listening to me this whole time. The ones who are at the other end wouldn't listen to me, but they listen to somebody I affected. And so my strategy shifted from me being all patient and kind and so forth. Those are still important to my values with people who are at the furthest end. But I know my success is with people who are in that middle place. My ability to affect change is with people who are in that middle place. And so I had to pull way back from all of this hours and hours. I would write essays in the comment section. I would record videos. I would do so much. And I pulled back and figured out, how do I support the people who are most affected by someone like me? And so I'm going to shift a bit into how we can talk about this, but I want to give some practical things that happened in me learning who I was affecting and learning how I could survive this. Because, like I said, I really did question everything I was doing when I couldn't reach these certain people. I did question all of the impact I had when I couldn't figure out, like, why have I been in this room for more than a year and people are still like hating on me? And so the things that I figured out, um, that one, some people are just there to be right. Some people just came so they could tell you what thus saith the Lord, or what's right, or the right way to vote, or the right way to get out of poverty. Whatever it is, they just came to tell you. Those are not the people that you're going to have an impact with. Some people are not looking for change. This is a little bit different in that some people just were showing up and they were like, oh, here's some new information. And because they weren't in a place to ask questions or to see another perspective, they're not also yet going to be in a place where they are looking to take in another perspective, like that could cause change. And so they will be resistant, or they'll even feel attacked for their way not being accepted by default. Some people are trolls, like legit. Some people just came to have thought exercises and it doesn't matter to them. And even if it's about your life and things that are life and death for you, they're just there because it's a fun topic and they like to see people get angry. I've had somebody tell me that they literally like to see people rage about something and then they walk away because they don't feel it. And it's just how it is. And they'll have long, drawn out, multi-day conversations with you just because they like to see people angry. So to know that some people are like that, and to kind of protect yourself against that energy. Some uh, and the biggest thing to know is that no matter what we're doing, we won't necessarily see an end to all of this. And so the question becomes, how do I engage in a way that's authentic to me, authentic to what's important to me, but with the full understanding that not all of this is going to be fixed because I had a conversation, or because I blasted somebody, or because I wrote an essay, or because I did another video, or because I did the right presentation, or because somebody invited me to speak somewhere. Not all of this is part of a much bigger picture, and I can only do so much. So, am I doing something that feels sustainable and that I can continue doing? Or am I going too far in the hopes that I'm finally going to reach that certain person? Maybe that's even a family member in your life. And so, what I had to do to make this more sustainable for myself, I had to constantly identify my intentions. What do I want to see happen when I respond to this person? What is it? What is the outcome that I'm looking for? Sometimes I'll just like respond because they're wrong. But what should happen? Should they change and say exactly what I'm saying? Should they just have a question in their mind? Find out what you're looking for and figure out, is that something that you can reasonably expect to have happen? Maybe you're looking for too much. Maybe you want them to start performing same-sex weddings. And it's like, maybe that's not the right goal for this conversation. Maybe you should just like work on them seeing you as a human who can hurt, because there's so many steps between other things that you may personally want that's not the full picture of what that person can even grasp at this point. Encourage and practice curiosity. I don't engage with people saying, well, you said this and this is wrong. Instead, I say, so what makes you think that? Where did that come from? Who taught you that? How does that work out, or how does that play out in your life or in your church? Asking questions and getting people to talk about what they believe is really, thank you, Carrie, is really important. Um, Asking yourself the questions of, what are your boundaries? Sometimes you have stuff that's really important to you that you have to decide not to talk about. For me, my church traumas are a really important thing, and I do talk about them publicly, but I've realized I don't owe everyone those conversations. And so sometimes I find myself walking toward a personal story of my trauma with somebody who's not going to hold that sacredly. And I have to choose, nope, not going to do it. Not going to have that conversation. And it's not because I don't think it would help them. It might help them, but I can't afford to give from that pot in places where I'm not going to see some empathy or some compassion for it. And then knowing who you reach well is really the key. So, me identifying that there's this movable middle, me identifying that there's some people who are ready to hear you, and knowing that those people can reach the ones that I can't reach, that's a really important part. So, I constantly am figuring out who has an ear to hear, like Jesus said. And then lastly, the self-care piece of this is most important. I'm gonna wrap up and we're gonna talk about this more in depth. But are you tired? Are you hungry? When's the last time you had water? Have you have you gone to the bathroom, like all these kinds of things that when we're so wrapped up and so engaged in a computer screen or in a tablet or in a phone, that we can start losing track of those things, and it may affect how we're engaging with people. Maybe you're excited about something, but you probably need to take a nap first and come back to it later. The comment's still going to be there, and you don't have to respond in that moment. Or maybe you ran out of energy. You started off and you had steam and you're like, oh, I don't even want to do this anymore. That's okay. Walk away. Let's say, hey, I need to come back to this at X amount of time, or I need to revisit this in another format. Would you like to have a phone call about it? Would you like to set up a date to talk about it? I don't want to do this online because it's not going to honor me in the conversation. Um, and then doing things like breathing exercises, grounding practices, ways that you remind yourself, are my shoulders tight? Is my jaw tense? Are my fingers and my grip, is it tightened up? If so, that can be a really good sign for you to take a step back, breathe, go outside if you can, do something so that you can be present in your own body and be aware of how you're feeling and what's going on. So there are lots of ways that you can begin to navigate what it means to have these tough conversations online. But the hope here is that this gives you a framework for where you might be effective versus where they're not going to hear you directly, and then to have a strategy to make sure that you take care of you, so that in all of these interactions, and these can be really important topics, but that in all of these interactions you have a way to be okay, and live to see another comment section day. So, all right.